And good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first introduction episode on Dantes Inferno, a new series we are having. I am Lynx from Norway, and with me I do have my co-hostess as always.
Yes, hello, Trina, and I'm from the UK. Just for anyone new, I think we got our first spammer in the D-Live chat just then. Great. Very witty he was and all. No, that was Tartini, the Devil's Trill, in case anyone's wondering about the intro music.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot to put the title in there.
Allegro. That was the movement it was.
Yeah. We have had a couple of spammers before, but they don't last long.
No, they don't. Gonna spam, get banned. Simple as.
Yeah, better get a new hobby.
Well, we are here to talk about being naughty, of course, because we are here to talk about the deadly sins and Dante's Inferno, and specifically what happens if you are bad. I don't think he included a circle for spammers, though.
No, but I'm sure there's plenty they would fit into.
Indeed.
Yeah. So this is one of the biggest works in the European history, in literature. I'm sure everyone has heard of it, but maybe like me, you haven't read it before. So that will definitely be an interesting journey.
Indeed. I certainly never had.
Yeah, neither have I. I've never really got that far. Not that I haven't been inclined to do it. It's, I like to read this book and that book and everything, and then you end up reading none of them. So yeah, gotta do better than that.
Well, welcome to another episode of things we really need to give ourselves an excuse to read, there'll probably be more of that. There's probably going to be more episodes based around. I really ought to have read this work of literature. Let's do it for half.
Yeah. Oh, this is a really interesting topic or something like that, and I gotta do something with that. So, yeah, we'll probably sit there into our old age reading stories with quivering voices and everything, which
Oh
would be
dear.
interesting.
If the internet's even a thing still by then, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen in the next like 40 years or 20 years. Uh,
No, I better
oh,
focus on the positive and try to get that into the future and not a dystopia that might be on our doors.
that's true. Um, Thank you to I Agree, by the way, for the diamond, and welcome to Ragnar, JD, Jack, 0022, Illuminatus, and JD, and Ethrin in the YouTube chat.
Hello, good to
Welcome
see
to you
you
lot.
all.
There's
um,
DDJ and I Agree, and Nullus
and
here on the
Philomena,
D Live. Oh, and Philomena.
yeah.
Nice.
The paradox as well, and he asks which circle of hell we are doing this week. This week is the introduction, so we will cover the first three cantos of the
Mm-hmm.
poem.
Yes.
And that will lead us up to the gates of the first circle. And then we will
Yes.
enter the next circle in the next episode. We're thinking of having this as a
Mm.
monthly series. So the first week of the month, maybe not the first week of January, it depends on when we start,
Mm.
but at least the
Yes.
first week of February.
Mm. Yeah, because it certainly has got a lot of parts to it, and there's a lot to cover, and certainly we will be wanting to dive properly into everything that this text has to offer. But yeah, I guess we should start with some general historical
Yeah.
background as to who Dante Alighieri actually was. Oh, yep.
I'm sorry, my OBS can be a bit slow at times. Um, I agree. I have a comment I want to read out first. Parts of Europa will be
Oh,
compulsory viewing after we win. Thank you.
ah, that's lovely.
Absolutely.
Well, we certainly would love to be officially involved in producing folklore content in an actual functioning society. That'd be very nice, wouldn't it?
Ab-
Yes.
Absolutely. But take it away on who Dante was.
Yes. So, Dante Alighieri, he lived from 1265 to around 1321. He's born in Florence, quite middle class. And now, what you have to understand about the situation at that time is that there were two political parties in the 13th century dominating Florence. Now, these are the Guelphs, who support the Pope, and the Ghibellines, who support the Holy Roman Emperor and the aristocratic families. And those two groups had a very bitter conflict. Ultimately, though, only the Guelph faction actually survived. So, for anyone who doesn't know the background to this, there's been quite long standing conflicts at this point between the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire, which was the originally sanctioned sort of successor of the Roman Empire proper by the popes. But they had this sort of problem where the power justification became quite cyclical. the popes justified the Holy Roman Empire, but the popes were dependent upon the Holy Roman Empire to basically enforce their power, and there was a lot of trouble, particularly in Germany. There was a lot of trouble. It did encompass Italy, though, and Austria and Burgundy and quite a lot of places. And there was a lot of trouble over who was actually to appoint church officials, up to and including the Pope. Because it did get to the point where monarchs were appointing bishops to the church, and in some cases they would even appoint a pope that was under their sort of influence and in their sort of favor. And of course, this was sort of very good for the monarchs because they had a lot of places to put. Well, you know how they say they produce an heir and a spare. Well, the church is quite often where you put your spare. It was useful to have your sons in the church, and I believe there was practices at this time of church officials taking some backhanders as well to do this. But ultimately, the papacy started to feel like the monarchy had a lot too much influence over who was being appointed to the church. And that was called the investiture controversy. Because, yeah, the monarchs don't want to be beholden to the power of the church. Not really. It sort of prevents their expansion of their central power. And that led to like 50 years of civil war in Germany. So this is very, very bitter. And it ended, well, it began as a power struggle really between Pope Gregory VII, if I've read the Roman numerals correctly, and Henry IV in 1076, and then ended in 1122 when Pope Calixtus II and Emperor Henry V agreed on something called the Concordat of Worms, which that was an agreement that required bishops to swear an oath of fealty to the secular monarch, who held authority, as they said, by the lance, so by force, but left selection of those people to the church. It did affirm the right of the church to invest their bishops with the authority, and they chose to symbolize that with a ring and a staff. And in Germany, but not in Italy or Burgundy, the emperor did also retain the right to preside over elections of abbots and also bishops by the church authorities, and to arbitrate in any disputes that might happen. And Holy Roman emperors, they completely renounced the right to choose the Pope. That's not happening. The Pope is completely decided by the church. But, of course, that wasn't exactly stuck to. The monarchs retained quite a lot of influence over who was selected, and the papacy wasn't very happy. And of course, we all know where this is going later in history. You can quite see the sort of setup for the Protestant Reformations, Luther in the 1500s, Divine Right of Kings, all that sort of malarkey, for sure. But the disputes between the popes and the Holy Roman Empires, it really continued until northern Italy was lost to the empire entirely. And that was after the war of these two factions called the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, which was very, very bitter. So ultimately the Guelphs win. However, afterwards, quite ironically, your pro-Pope Guelphs think, some of them anyway, think, oh, the Pope's got a bit too much power now. So they have a split into the White Guelph Party, which was associated more with the old Ghibelline Party, so a bit more pro-state, pro-emperor, especially by Guelph standards. They're mainly composed of merchants and traders. And then the Black Guelphs, who were led by old banking families. They are much more about the papacy and a lot less about the emperor. Stuff I'm gathering, and one can speculate as to why each of them sort of had these views. I think there was, once the papacy actually gained control of Florence, there was corruption, perhaps, that some people noticed, and certainly the Black Guelphs being totally pro-papacy and also being banking families, you wonder if they were more behind the church as a power center because it stopped the centralized expansion of the state and possible taxes on them. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that more over the course of this series. Might be interesting. But yes, Dante in 1300, aged 35, he's got a government post, and he's a lot closer to the White Guelphs. And Pope Boniface VIII sides with the banking interests, the Black Guelphs. And then in 1300, the six priors of Florence, state their opposition to Boniface's plans to have the Catholic Church control the economies of both Florence and Tuscany, and Boniface makes his move to have them excommunicated. So, 1301, Dante's leaving Florence on a mission to gain support for his and others' opposition to the Black Guelphs. While he's away, the Black Guelphs completely take over Florence, and Dante gets exiled from his native city. He refuses to face the charges and is sentenced to death in Florence, which keeps him in exile for the rest of his life. So he writes all of the divine commentary. Yeah, sorry, I'm stumbling under my words. He writes all of the divine comedy, Inferno, Purgatory, Paradise. While he's away from Florence, he's exiled, he's never allowed to go back. The Inferno is completed by 1314. The fictional date of the poem is 1300 in Passion Week, or days sort of leading up to Easter for Christians. That's what they call that, which is the anniversary, what's considered the anniversary of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. The work does contain prophecies, but those are real events that Dante the poet experienced after his exile. So that from the point of view of 1300, when Dante the character pilgrim is speaking from, they are prophecies. That's when Dante the character, the pilgrim, is going to hell. But yeah, he's also got a lot in the poem, obviously, that is prescient for the modern day. It's written in about 100 cantos. There's sort of a particular verse form that the poem would follow in its native language, terza rima, which is sets of 3 interlocking rhyming lines. And of course, he's been guided through in this poem by Virgil, who we will probably get into later. Who's Virgil? Why does he link? I'm sure many of you already know him because he did write a very famous book, the Aeneid. In Paradise, Dante has a particular supporter as well called Beatrice. We'll hear more about her. And Dante's particular patron for this work was Congrande della Scala, who was actually a very staunch Ghibelline. So that might be something indeed to consider as we read the work. You know, whose patronage was it under? How is that influencing it? What's sort of the political conflicts at the time? I think that might indeed be a very interesting aspect about this piece, actually. Thanks.
There, I found my mute button.
It can take a while.
Yeah, in particular when you have 3 of them. You have to find the right one. Yeah, it would definitely be interesting to look into it. Though we're not really a political show, so then it would have to be a political special, I would think, or historical
Yes,
special.
I mean, I don't intend to be bringing it up far too much. But yes, one must. There will be parts of this, I think, which are specifically referring to Dante's circumstances at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Another interesting thing about Dante is his importance of developing Italian as a written language. Um, I didn't know that before I started looking into this. Before that, they used Latin as their written language. Not so much with poetry and everything, but there wasn't really an Italian language per se. And he started to write in his local dialect, and he was one of the first to do that. One who picked up on his work was, I don't remember the name right now, but the author of the Decameron, which is a certain amount of stories told over 14 days, which I definitely want to look into. It seems very interesting. And that was written some decades later. He was also very important in developing the Italian language, written language. So yeah, I definitely want to
Yeah.
stick my nose into that one.
It certainly wasn't a thing that I much knew about Dante, but certainly he seems to have been about as pivotal to Italian language, perhaps, as maybe Shakespeare was to English. He did provide us with many sort of forms and words and sayings.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
quite, it's quite cool.
Yeah.
It's sort of the work so formative that it literally affects the language. You were looking in particular into the sort of Greek influences within the poem, weren't you, Lynx?
Yeah, it ended up being more the history of it. I was admittedly a bit late in my research, so I didn't have quite the time that I would like to have. But I do have an overview of and perhaps some questions about the origin, how it developed. Within the Catholic Church is, the seven deadly sins is in particular tied to the Catholic Church. And
Very true.
the most direct line actually starts in the desert of Lower Egypt, around. I think it started around 100 or 200 AD, where there were some people who fled the cities and into the desert, because they wanted to flee the modern life, all of the material world and everything, because they felt that would,
Relatable.
yeah, definitely. They felt that it would just distract them from Christ, and they wanted to get as close to him as possible. And they started to, after a while, to gather in small communities, and that was sort of the start of the monastic tradition in Christianity, and has a lot of similarities to the same development in Buddhism and Hinduism, with people basically withdrawing from normal society to devote themselves to God. Now, this started before Christianity emerged as a systematic theology and a formalized doctrine. So most of the people were uneducated. They didn't know any scriptures or anything like that. They just went into the desert and focused on prayers and an ascetic life and all of that. And instead of preaching theology and reading scriptures, they told each other stories. And after some time, the oral tradition was written down, which I will get into later. So the way they lived and taught each other, and if people came to visit and everything, was very, very much the same way that Jesus did it. Because it wasn't formalized.
Yeah.
And the tradition in Egypt when it came to Christianity was a bit different because they had, when they appointed new bishops, they had to be long-standing monks. So it wasn't, the second son, the third son, or anything like that could just get appointed into a bishop, or one who had climbed the ladder in the Christian circles. They had to be really dedicated. So that really shaped the characters of the bishops and gave line to some very interesting insights, which in particular the Eastern Orthodox side of Christianity, they have retained that. And quite a few think that the Egyptian bishops was the real origin to that. The schism between the Roman Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church was very about theology in very certain aspects. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was. That break came around the year 1000, I think. Those who study patristics, that is basically early church history. They study the first 1,000 years of the church.
Yeah, and I imagine that must be quite an interesting but confusing study. There's not a lot of record of what's going on back then. No, the Eastern sort of Orthodox tradition coming from the Egyptian sort of priests. I don't think we'll get into any debates on who was the real Egyptian.
No. It won't be we was pharaohs or anything like that.
Was we? It's a debate for another time.
Yeah. So one of these desert fathers, as they were known as the desert fathers and mothers, because there were women as well, not just men. One of these was Igravius Ponticus, or also known as Evacrius the Solitary. He lived from about 345 to 399 AD. His background was very different from the others. He was born into a Christian family in Pontus, I think it's pronounced. That was a late Roman province in what is now Turkey. Oh, just excuse me 1 minute. I'm close to a voice fail, but I will last the show, I promise you.
A poof.
Yeah. Better take that booster jab, just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah. He was educated in Neocesaria. I do have problems with this name. I do apologize. That was a city in now Turkey, also of Roman origin. And he was ordained elector under Basil the Great, who is a saint. And then he went with him to Constantinople and rose in the ranks. And
We've
he
had
stayed there.
sort of a bit of a reminder about the split between the Eastern and the Western Empire that happened around that time. Obviously, yeah, that's probably complicating matters indeed.
It's the whole region is very complicated with the history, with people coming and going and getting into power and losing power, and they all influence each other, you know. So it can be a bit hard to really find out. And there's quite a few interesting Christian sects.
Sects.
It's
an odd word to be. It's an odd word to say, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. In particular, if you have a bit troublesome tongue, as mine can be at times. And when I did look into many of the early saints from that region, several of them traveled about the region. Syria, Jerusalem, Constantinople, Egypt. So I'm sure they had influences from quite a few traditions.
Yes, I'm very sure they did.
Yeah, it can be a bit hard to identify.
Nullus in the chat finds it fascinating how often the Roman emperors tried to unite the empire and sort of get it back together again, regain lost glory. I suppose they would try and do that. They were certainly persistent at it, yes, for sure.
I do think that's the case with most empires after their wane, that the people remember the story, so they want to capture that again. To get back to Evacrius, when he was in Constantinople, he did rise in the ranks, but he felt that he was tempted in a few ways. It seems like he was a bit fond of a cozy life, good clothing and all of that. But when he fell in love with a married woman who just happened to be married to a high-ranking guy, he decided to leave the city, just not to get into trouble. He didn't do anything with her, but better get away from that temptation, which I both understand and respect. So he went to Jerusalem and stayed with within a couple of monasteries there. But he was still very tempted by his vices and ended up deciding to become a monk. And he did continue as a monk in Jerusalem for a time, but then he decided to go over to Lower Egypt and joined the Cenobite communities, wanting to get out of the materialistic world that I mentioned previously. So he did that and was welcomed into the community. He definitely took to the ascetic lifestyle to extremes. His diet was so restricted and so little that he actually ruined his digestive tract. So maybe not an example to follow. But he definitely stands out from the other desert fathers because he was highly educated. So he was probably one of the first to start recording and systemize the oral theology and tradition of these communities. And today he is credited with writing 19 titles and also several scrolls and scriptural commentaries. So he was quite a prolific writer. And the teaching from the Desert Fathers and Mothers are regarded highly today. His most prominent feature of all this writing was his systematization and categorization of temptation, probably because he struggled so much with it himself. And he condensed it down to 8 evil thoughts or sins. And he aimed to do this so that people could more easily discern what their problem was and then be able to repent and move towards Christ and work to not repeat it. That is one of the thing about sins and penitence and everything is that you realize what you're doing wrong and try as best as you can to stop doing it, you know?
Yes.
But,
8, so originally 8 then.
yeah. Within the Christian tradition, there was 8.
I wonder when it reduced to 7. Was that purely Dante, or was that another thing
No,
that happened that reduced it to 7?
that was Pope. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Pope Gregory the First, or also known as the Great, in 590. I mean, he revised that list. The list of 8 sins are gluttony, lust, greed, sadness, akeda, I think it's pronounced, also known as despondency, anger, vainglory, and pride. And Pope Gregory, he put together Acadia and Tristia, or sorrow, and called that sloth. Those two combined, because both pertain to having not really much luster for life. We're kind of listless and everything, so he combined them. He also combined vainglory and pride into pride.
Those are a lot of synonyms, so
Yeah,
it seems quite expedient.
yeah. And he also added envy to that. So
It's true, it can get you into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, so the list of the final 7 deadly sins are gluttony, lust, greed, sloth, anger, pride, and envy. Which is quite fitting with the number 7, and that's connection to, God and the godly realms, so to speak. They also have a corresponding virtue. So lust corresponds with chastity, gluttony corresponds to temperance, greed corresponds to charity or generosity, sloth with diligence, wrath with patience, envy with gratitude or kindness, and pride with humility. So, in order to repent from your sins, you have to work towards the 7 virtues. So, yeah, that is basically the short version of the story within Christian Church.
Yes, parallel system going on in then some heathen faiths and an asatru of 9 nifs. So like sins, things you absolutely shouldn't do, and 9 noble virtues as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite a good system to have. Makes very clear what is right
Mm-hmm.
and wrong. And there you go. You didn't know exactly where the 7 deadly sins did come from. You know now. Shall we have our first canto of the poem?
Yes, we can.
Great. Right. Time for some Dante.
Yes, let's start the poem.
Inferno, Canto 1. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Ah me, how hard a thing it is to say what was this forest savage, rough, and stern, which in the very thought renews the fear. So bitter is it, death is little more, but of the good to treat, which there I found. Speak will I of other things I saw there. I cannot well repeat how there I entered, so full was I of slumber at the moment in which I had abandoned the true way. But after I had reached a mountain's foot, at that point where the valley terminated, which had with consternation pierced my heart, upward I looked, and I beheld its shoulders, vested already with that planet's rays, which leadeth others right by every road. Then was the fear a little quieted, that in my heart's lake had endured throughout the night, which I had passed so piteously. And even as he, who with distressful breath forth issued from the sea upon the shore, turns to the water, perilous, and gazes, so did my soul, that was fleeing onward, turn itself back to re-behold the pass which never yet a living person left. After my weary body I had rested, the way resumed I on the desert slope, so that the firm foot ever was the lower, and lo, almost where the ascent began, a panther, light and swift exceedingly, which with a spotted skin was covered o'er, and never moved she from before my face, nay, rather did impede so much my way, that many times I to return had turned. The time was the beginning of the morning, and up the sun was mounting with those stars, that with him were, what time the love divine at first in motion set those beauteous things, so were to me occasion of good hope, the variegated skin of that wild beast, the hour of time and the delicious season, but not so much that did not give me fear, a lion's aspect which appeared to me. He seemed as if against me he were coming, with head uplifted and with ravenous hunger, so that it seemed the air was afraid of him, and a she-wolf, that with all hungerings seemed to be laden in her meagreness, and many folk has caused to live forlorn. She brought upon me so much heaviness with the affright that from her aspect came, that I the hope relinquished of the height. And as he is who willingly acquires, and the time comes that causes him to lose, who weeps in all his thoughts and is despondent, e'en such made me that beast withouten peace, which, coming on against me by degrees, thrust me back thither where the sun is silent. While I was rushing downward to the lowland, before mine eyes did one present himself, who seemed from long-continued silence hoarse. When I beheld him in the desert vast, "Have pity on me," unto him I cried, "whiche'er thou art, or shade or real man." He answered me, "Not man. Man I once was, and both my parents were of Lombardy, and Mantones by country, both of them. Sub Iulio I was born, though it was late, and I lived at Rome under the good Augustus, during the time of false and lying gods. A poet was I, and I sang that just son of Anchises who came forth from Troy, after that Ilion the Superb was burned. But thou, why goest thou back to such annoyance? Why climbest thou not the Mount Delectable, which is the source and cause of every joy? Now art thou that Virgilus, and that fountain which spreads abroad so wide a river of speech? I made response to him with bashful forehead. Oh, of the other poets' honour and light, avail me the long study and great love that have impelled me to explore thy volume. Thou art my master and my author, thou. Thou art alone the one from whom I took that beautiful style that has done honour to me. Behold the beast for which I have turned back. Do thou protect me from her, famous sage, for she doth make my veins and pulses tremble. Thee it behooves to take another road, responded he, when he beheld me weeping, if from this savage place thou wouldst escape, because this beast, at which thou criest out, suffers not any one to pass her way, but so doth harass him, that she destroys him, and has a nature so malign and ruthless, that never doth she glut her greedy will, and after food is hungrier than before. Many of the animals with whom she weds, and more they shall be still, until the greyhound comes, who shall make her perish in pain. He shall not feed on either earth or pelf, but upon wisdom, and on love and virtue. Twixt Feltro and Feltro shall his nation be. Of that low Italy shall he be the saviour, on whose account the maid Camilla died. Euryalus, Turnus, Nissus of their wounds. Through every city shall he hunt her down, until he shall have driven her back to hell, there from whence envy did first let her loose. Therefore, I think, and judge it for thy best, thou follow me, and I will be thy guide, and lead thee hence, through the eternal place, where thou shalt hear the desperate lamentations, shalt see the ancient spirits disconsolate, who cry out, each one for the second death, and thou shalt see those who contented are within the fire, because they hope to come, whene'er it may be, to the blessed people. To whom, then, if thou wishest to ascend, a soul shall be for that than I more worthy. With her at my departure I will leave thee, because that emperor who reigns above, in that I was rebellious to his law, wills that through me none come to his city. He governs everywhere, and there he reigns. There is his city and his lofty throne. O happy he whom thereto he elects. And I to him, poet, I thee entreat, by the same God whom thou didst never know, so that I may escape this woe and worse. Thou wouldst conduct me there, where thou hast said, that I may see the portal of St. Peter, and those thou makest so disconsolate. Then he moved on, and I behind him followed.
So that was the first canto, and the poem has begun. I do have to say it's quite good with words.
Yes,
It definitely paints a
indeed.
picture.
Indeed. No, there's a lot to get into, really, even in that first canto there. For a start, we should maybe sort of quickly kind of summarize what happens there. Dante is trying to go up the Mount Delectable to heaven. However, he has some serious trouble with a group of guardian animals namely 3 of them. Some sort of spotted panther, which one can only assume to be a cheetah, and a lion, and a she wolf.
It probably wasn't. It could also. Sorry, I just got my cat's mix up there. It might not just be a cheetah. It could also be
Hmm.
a leopard.
A leopard or a jaguar.
Mm-hmm.
True, a jaguar might also be the cat that it is. And I suppose there's a lot of sort of potential candidates for that cat that could alter the symbolism of what it is.
Not too much, I think. I think many of the cats do represent much of the same thing. In particular, when it's cat that seems
Hmm.
very similar. So the ones mentioned as a spotted cat will be viewed differently than a lion, for example.
Yes, that's true. I mean, the lion, that was some sort of pretty obvious symbolism usually inherent in the lion, especially where, considering the European tradition, usually symbolizes bravery and honor and such like that. So I don't know, the fact that Dante's being stopped by a lion at one point indicates that he's lost his way. He currently doesn't have enough of these things
It also represents.
um,
Sorry
to
for interrupting
ascend.
you there. The lion also
Yep.
represent
What?
regality. The kingship.
Hmm. Yes, does. That's another sort of aspect to it. I was particularly intrigued, of course, that he had so much trouble with the wolf because the wolf is very familiar to me in many aspects of mythology, really symbolizing ferocity and cunning and often cruelty and evil. I mean, the first wolf that I think of is probably Fenrir, the chaos symbol, the swallower of the sun, and then this also happens in Celtic myth as well. A wolf will swallow the sun. Um, there is also the dark symbolism of the wolf in the Christian symbolism, which is often the story of the good shepherd and his sheep and defending them from the wolf, which is often the allegory for Christ and Satan. But also, the wolf has been a triumphal symbol as well. I mean, it's a bit dualistic. It was sacred to Apollo in ancient Greece and Odin in Norse myth, and it was sacred to the Roman war god Mars as well. And it did suckle, a she wolf did suckle the founders of Rome as well, which is quite particular um, to Dante's situation with Italy. But he definitely portrays this she wolf as bad and says that a greyhound will come. Or Virgil at least says that a greyhound will come and drive that wolf back into hell. Which I suppose there are speculations about why the greyhound has been chosen. Uh, Possibly because it was just a hunting dog that was used in those sort of endeavors. And there's speculation as to who the greyhound refers to and whether it's a political reference or a religious reference. So whether it is Christ who will come and chase the she wolf away from the mountain, or whether he is, because he does say will be ruler of that whole Low Italy. which at the time, Congrande della Scala, his patron, was waging a lot of wars against Guelphs in various regions of Italy. So it could be cheering on the eventual victory of his patron, whom he sees to be storing righteousness in his area. So that was an interpretation that people sort of couldn't make their minds up upon. I think there was a lot of ambiguity with it.
The wolf will. This is also tied to some of what we see in the second canto, so I won't get too much into it. But it does remind me of Remus and Remulus and the origins of Rome, the city. You know, they were twins who were suckled by a wolf.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, did sort of think about them, and that would obviously make the wolf quite a positive animal, possibly in the Roman viewpoint.
Yeah, I might touch a bit more on that after the second canto. I won't give too much away for those who don't know it.
But yes, again, um, maybe the wolf also represents sort of his ancestors also deeming him not quite worthy to ascend the Mount Delectable. If the wolf is really tied to the ancestry of Italy. It's a layer of symbolism that one could read
Absolutely.
into it. And then I think with the lion, I feel like that's kind of self-explanatory why that would be God's chosen animal of guardian for the slope to heaven. Because like I say, that's generally a symbol of goodness and bravery. I'm not sure that it has any dualistic sort of bad symbolism. I mean, there was a monster involving a lion head in Greek mythology. There was the Chimera, and that's not a very nice beast. It has the head of a lion, but it also breathes fire. But it does have the body of a goat and the tail of a snake. So the lion kind of gives me chimeric connotations as well, perhaps.
Uh,
And
for me, it mostly takes my mind to having to prove your strength. You have to be worthy of whatever that challenge is.
yeah, that to me did mostly make me think, well, if Dante's being stalked by a lion, he's not courageous or worthy enough to get up this mountain yet. And then, yeah, so the only thing that remains kind of ambiguous is sort of the initial panther that Dante meets. But in a lot of wildcats that I saw were representing sort of cunning and maybe elegance is what I'd associate with them as well. Definitely. And I think also that I would associate them with a lot of power. Just a lot of raw power behind these sort of predatory panther cats. And they are sometimes, I think, as well used on coats of arms as well.
Yeah, it's definitely
In my
a powerful symbol. often used with, powerful families and everything. And I would also point out a certain aspect of freedom. Cats are, in general, seen as more independent. So maybe independence is a bit of a better word than compared to,
Mm.
the dog family.
Yes. No, sort of a jaguar heraldry symbolism is perhaps something to be looking at there. The panther is sort of in the heraldry symbol, I think definitely accorded to be feminine. I think it's definitely accorded to be a feminine animal. And I'm certainly thinking that would represent a sort of militaristic kind of disposition. Yeah, defense with one's own life. When the line the young are in jeopardy, bravery, defense of the weak. That's what is sort of been associated within the heraldry. Um, on the continent, panthers quite often depicted with the tail of a lion or horns or the claws of an eagle on its forelegs. I've seen that very very much actually. I've seen a lot of panthers with eagle claws on European coats of arms. So that is something else that the panther possibly would have represented at the time. Well, heraldry is not exactly my strong
Neither
point.
mine. It's quite of a specific topic and very intricate. Thank you to Frody from Guide to Culture for the host. That is very kind of you. Just to keep, yeah,
Thank you indeed. Yeah.
housekeeping. We do have to do that sometimes.
But yes. So he does bump into Virgil at this point and is very, very, very much admiring him. Absolutely fangirling over Virgil. And of course, Virgil is the author of the Aeneid, which is a Latin epic poem that was written by him between 29 and 19 BC, which told the story of Aeneas, who was a Trojan, traveled to Italy and became the ancestor of the Romans. It's a long poem. It's got like 9,696 lines in
Another,
that,
another one
and
on my list.
it's quite yes, it's quite an epic. I'm in the middle of reading
So
the
am I.
Iliad myself, and yeah, it's quite. I'm enjoying it. It's a compelling story, and of course the Aeneid does link to the Iliad because the poems are 12. The first six of the poems, 12 books, are really telling the story of Aeneas who wanders from Troy to Italy, and the poem's second half tells of the Trojans' war upon the Latins, under whose name Aeneas and his Trojan followers are sort of going to be subsumed. So they become the Latins, and the hero Aeneas is also in the Iliad. And Paradise, of course, Virgil cannot enter because he's a heathen, although a virtuous heathen. So, yes, we're getting this from a Christian viewpoint there. Entrance to heaven denied. Dante is then sort of, well, he's told by Virgil later why he's there. So that's sort of the context of Virgil. So Virgil's been quite he's a narrator that obviously Dante has very specifically chosen for this poem. Well, not a narrator, a guide that Dante has very specifically chosen for this poem because he's so instrumental in recording the whole founding of Italy. And I believe that Dante is really trying to write here about what he thinks the destiny of Italy is, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Any thoughts?
No,
Yeah.
I think you covered it pretty well. So perhaps we should move on to
Yeah.
the second canto.
Yeah, I think we should. Let's do that.
Okay. Inferno, Canto 2. Day was departing, and the embrowned air released the animals that are on earth from their fatigues. And I, the only one, made myself ready to sustain the war, both of the way and likewise of the woe, which memory that earth shall not retrace. O Muses, O high genius, now assist me. O memory that didst write down what I saw, here thy nobility shall be manifest. And I began, Poet who guides me, regard my manhood if it be sufficient, ere to the arduous path thou dost confide me. Thou sayest that of Silvius the parent, while yet corruptible, unto the world immortal went, and was there bodily. But if the adversary of all evil was courteous, thinking of the high effect that issue would from him, and who, and what, to men of intellect unmeet it seems not, for he was of great Rome and of her empire, in the imperial heaven as father chosen, the which and what, wishing to speak the truth, were established as the holy place wherein sits the successor of the greatest Peter. Upon this journey whence thou givest him vaunt, things did he hear, which the occasion were both his victory and the papal mantle. Thither went afterwards the chosen vessel to bring back comfort thence unto that faith, which of salvation's way is the beginning. But I, why thither come, and who conceits it? I not Aeneas am, I am not Paul, nor I nor others think me worthy of it. Therefore, if I resign myself to come, I fear the coming may be ill advised. Thou art wise, and knowest better than I speak. Anasius, who unwills what he willed, and by new thoughts doth his intention change, so that from his design he quite withdraws. Such I became upon that dark hillside, because in thinking I consumed the emprise, which was so very prompt in the beginning. If I have well thy language understood, replied that shade of the magnanimous, thy soul attainted is with cowardice, which many times a man encumbers so, it turns him back from honoured enterprise, as a false light doth a beast when he is shy. That thou mayst free thee from this apprehension, I'll tell thee why I came, and what I heard at the first moment when I grieved for thee. Among those was I who are in suspense, and a fair saintly lady called to me in such wise, I besought her to command me. Her eyes were shining brighter than the star, and she began to say, gentle and low, with voice angelical in her own language, O spirit courteous of Mantua, of whom the fame still in the world endures, and shall endure long-lasting as the world. As a friend of mine, and not a friend of fortune, upon the desert slope is so impeded upon his way, that he has turned through terror, and may, I fear, already be so lost, that I too late have risen to his succour from that which I have heard of him in heaven. Bestir thee now, and without speech ornate, and with what needful is for his release, assist him so that I may be consoled. Beatrice am I who do bid thee go. I come from there where I would fain return. Love moved me, which compelleth me to speak. Then, when I shall be in presence of my Lord, full often will I praise thee unto him. Then paused she, and thereafter I began. O Lady of Virtue, thou alone through whom the human race exceedeth all contained within the heaven that has the lesser circles, So grateful unto me is thy commandment to obey. If it were already done, were late. No farther needst thou ope to me thy wish. But the cause tell me why thou dost not shun the hair descending into this centre from the vast place thou burnest to return to. Since thou would fain so inwardly discern, briefly will I relate, she answered me, why I am not afraid to enter here. For those things only should one be afraid which have the power of doing others harm. Of the rest, no, because they are not fearful. God in his mercy such created me that misery of yours attains me not, nor any flame assails me of this burning. A gentle lady is in heaven who grieves at this impediment to which I send thee, so that stern judgment there above is broken. In her entreaty she besought Lucia and said, thy faithful one now stands in need of thee, and unto thee I recommend him. Lucia, foe of all that cruel is, hastened away and came unto the place where I was sitting with the ancient Rachel. Beatrice, said she, the true praise of God, why succourest thou not him who loved thee so? For thee he issued from the vulgar herd. Dost thou not hear the pity of his plaint? Dost thou not see the death that combats him beside that flood where ocean has no vaunt? Never were persons in the world so swift to work their will and to escape their woe as I, after such words as these were uttered. Came thither downward from my blessed seat, confiding in thy dignified discourse, which honours thee and those who've listened to it. And after she thus has spoken unto me, weeping, her shining eyes she turned away, whereby she made me swifter in my coming. And unto thee I came as she desired. I have delivered thee from that wild beast which barred the beautiful mountain's short ascent. What is it then? Why dost thou delay? Why is such baseness bedded in thy heart? Daring and hardihood, why hast thou not? Seeing that 3 such ladies benedict are caring for thee in the court of heaven, and so much good my speech does promise thee. Even as the flowers by nocturnal chill bow down and closed, when the sun whitens them, uplift themselves, all open on their stems. Such became I with my exhausted strength, and such good courage to my heart there cursed, that I began like an intrepid person. O she compassionate who succoured me, and courteous thou who hast obeyed so soon the words of truth which he addressed to thee. Thou hast my heart with so desire disposed to the adventure with these words of thine, that to my first intent I have returned. Now go, for one sole will is in us both, thou leader and thou lord and master thou. Thus I said to him, and when he had moved, I entered on the deep and savage way. So there we had Canto 2. That is mostly dialogue between Virgil and Dante. And I suppose I will pick up from Canto 1 with my points there.
Yes. And it can get a bit confusing as to who's reading at times with dialogue within dialogue, because Virgil is relating what the lady said, and then it switches to a lot of what the
Yeah,
lady
we would
said,
have to get
and then and back to Virgil saying, "So that's what she said, and she was very, very beautiful, so I did it."
I thought I would be considerate and not do a good baritone and some falsettos and everything for the women.
Hello.
I did try my
Yeah.
hand at the Parson's Tale, but I figured I didn't have a good baritone for a sermon, though I did try my best. But to take it back to the image of the wolf, he does reference Aeneas and the Romans and everything. So I do think that is a symbol a bit of being worthy of carrying their legacy. And you could argue that Rome at this point, and for quite a bit, including the church, wanted to pick up that heritage. And as he questions Virgil,
True.
I'm not worthy for this, to make this journey and everything. And I do think the animals he met was the challenge, his resolve, and he had to prove himself that he had to be worthy to make the journey. Though most people who are able to make a journey like that, even being able to, will say that you have qualified, but the final test is that you actually have the courage to do it. And as Virgil says, you have a lack of courage. So
Yes.
I do think that is quite a big point. I do find it interesting that the three who speaks for him are women, because they then represent the nurture aspect. They are the one who are.
And also the three women speaking for him. I mean, I always come up with this imagery, I suppose. But the three women as well, often, yep, fate. So fate intervening with the heavens to say no, you give this one a chance. Quite something that quite often happens in a lot of myths.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting as well. But
Oh
sorry
no,
to
that's
interrupt you
fine.
there. Go ahead.
This canto, you really see his internal struggle, and that it really does need Virgil's help in order to make the journey and to find that courage within himself, and also knowing that he had the backing from those three women and basically God to do this journey. The figure of Beatrice, that was a woman he was in love with in his youth before he got married, but he ended up doing a political marriage. And
Yes.
she she remained in his mind, and kind of ended up as his muse.
Yes. There's sort of a lot of comparisons between her and the muse, for sure. And she's certainly left this massive impression on Dante's life. And he's sort of holding her up as, yeah, an idealized image of female nurturance, mercy, sort of. He really puts her on a pedestal, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I completely forgot what I was about to say. um,
Oh dear, it happens. It happens. Nullus has got to step out for a little, but was enjoying the conversation and enjoys the presentation
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you, Nullus.
Hopefully, you will make it back in time, or else there's always the replay.
Yes,
Yeah.
always the replay.
As I did forget my final point on Beatrice, I will jump over to Lucia, which definitely I found interesting because of the Lucia Day in Scandinavia. I did touch upon that before Christmas last year, and there is a very long-standing tradition in Norway that and Scandinavia in general that originates in the Norse tradition, but when the church came, they renamed it and dedicated it to the Saint Lucia, which was an Italian saint. Who I do think she became a martyr for her faith. She was prosecuted for being a Christian, but she didn't waver in her faith, and for that, and her tribunals for that, she ended up being canonized. And she is associated with a guiding light. She brought food and other necessities to because this was before Christianity was a recognized religion in Rome. She went down into the catacombs and everything and looked after the Christians who were in hiding. And so one of her imagery is walking with the light, so she is lighting the way. So that is definitely an interesting tie in this poem. The guiding light. Do you have any thoughts on that, Katrina?
No, sorry, I just got a little bit distracted by the chat there. But yes, definitely, she seems to be the main representation of a virtuous person. She's sort of demonstrating that they should be selfless, even when she's happy in heaven. She's still thinking of poor Dante, who's down on earth having lost his way, and she's used to make a point, of course, that once you are in heaven or spiritually enlightened or ascended, you can walk among the worst places and feel no fear. You can walk in the fire and not be burned because you are immune to whatever chaos is around you, which I actually also found quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very, very consistent with what a lot of people, Buddhists and Hindus and many schools, say that enlightenment sort of is. In fact, I think in some trials and initiations, you do literally walk across burning coals or fire, and if you do that quick enough and you don't think about it and you're focused, you don't feel that because you don't have the fear.
You don't even have to walk quickly. You can walk quite slowly and not be burned. At least that's what I hear. I haven't tried it myself. So
no, I don't think I'm quite at that stage of
no,
enlightenment
don't
yet.
try this at home, kids, please.
Not unless you've done like serious monk training.
And
I quite a few people can do it. There's sort of ways and techniques to it.
Yeah, and also with tests like that, it's not just to so to say, not be hurt by what you do. It's that you control the pain, that you control your body and your feelings around that pain. And creating a very strong core within you.
Oh, I agree. Stood on some Lego yesterday. Ow, yeah, that's worse than the cold. Thunor was with him though,
Yeah.
so it was fine. This was how he
Yeah.
got through
Well, that's good
the
to hear.
pain. Oh dear. Oh, D-Life being stingy about giving Timmy lemons. D-Life advert for 30 seconds to earn some lemons. 0.1 of a lemon.
Uh,
You're right, Timmy, not even enough for a gin and tonic.
no, and in
Shameful.
particular, when you consider how much one lemon is, that's not really much. Um,
No. It's like a fraction of 12 cents
yeah.
or something. Oh dear. D-Life sort it out like.
Well, well, lemons do
Oh dear.
tend to pile up, so yeah.
They do. Um we have quite a few. They keep turning up at my house in boxes, making a lot
Hmm.
of lemonade. Getting quite inconvenient.
Yeah.
Ah
One
dear.
aspect of
Yeah.
my research that I didn't have time to was Rachel and who she is. Do you have anything on that?
So Rachel in the Bible, um, I believe she was, if I remember correctly, someone who was the favorite of Jacob's two wives and mother of Joseph and Benjamin, who were two of the sort of 12 progenitors of all the tribes
Okay, so you could
of
say that she
Israel.
is the primordial mother, so to speak.
Yeah, so to speak. Yeah. But she was married to Jacob. This is the Rachel they mean. There might be others. She's married to Jacob, and Jacob sort of finds her. She's watering her father's flock, um, and Jacob had traveled a great distance to find her father Laban, um, because Rebecca had sent him there to be safe from his angry twin brother, who's of course Esau, who we won't uh, get into right now. But I can post something about who Esau was. So yeah, he falls in love with Rachel and agrees to work 7 years for Laban in return for her hand in marriage. But on the night of the wedding, the bride's obviously veiled, and Jacob doesn't notice that they swap Leah, Rachel's older sister. Um, um, Rachel was described as lovely in form and beautiful, and Leah had tender eyes. Jacob then goes and confronts Laban, obviously, who excuses his deception by saying, "Well, the older sister should marry first." And then he says to Jacob, like, "Look, after your wedding week is finished, you can take Rachel as a wife as well, and then work another 7 years as payment for her." And then God sort of sees that Leah isn't properly loved by her husband, so gives her sons instead. Rachel, though, she remains unable to conceive. So, according to sort of as the biblical scholars, there's this sort of infertility of the matriarchs sort of heightens the drama of that, and the birth of the eventual sons, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, event emphasizes that the pregnancy is sort of an act of God. But Rachel became jealous of Leah and then gave her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob to be a surrogate mother for her. And then Bilhah gives birth to two sons that Rachel named and raised Dan and Naphtali. And Leah responded by offering her handmaiden to Jacob, and then named and raised two sons, Gad and Asher. Her handmaiden Silpah bore, and according to some of the commentary, some say Bilhah and Silpah were actually half sisters of Leah and Rachel. And then Leah conceives again, and then Rachel's finally blessed with a son called Joseph, who's going to become Jacob's favorite child. So I guess Rachel is someone who represents one who maybe got too haughty over another woman, or didn't respect the order of things, trying to get married before her older sister, who has been waiting longer, deserves to get married first. Someone who's perhaps envious, but then eventually overcomes that and is blessed with a child.
Yeah.
But yeah, the sort of the Rachel's son Joseph was destined to be the leader of all of Israel's tribes. So Jacob then decides to return to the land of Canaan with his family after Joseph's birth, and that's fearing that Laban would deter him, try and stop him. He flees with Leah and Rachel, his two wives, and his 12 children, without informing his father-in-law. Laban pursues him and accuses him of stealing his idols, and Rachel had actually taken her father's idols and hid them inside of her camel's seat cushion and sat upon them. So, because Laban had neglected to give his daughters their inheritance. So, not knowing that the idols were in his wife's possession, Jacob actually pronounces a curse on whoever had them. With whoever you will find your gods, he will not live. And then Laban obviously proceeds to search the tents of Jacob and his wives, and he comes to Rachel's tent, and she tells her father, Let not my lord be angered that I cannot rise up before you, for the way of women is upon me. I think that might have is that an excuse about a period? I don't know.
Well,
But then the band leaves her alone. Whatever excuse she's pulled there, Laban left her alone. But the curse that Jacob had pronounced came true shortly after. So I suppose she's sitting with Virgil in hell because she's done that, because she died in the labor of her next son, Benjamin, who she called Ben-Oni, son of my mourning. But Jacob called him Benjamin, which means son of the right. So yeah, that's what happened to Rachel. She stole something from her father-in-law because she wanted her inheritance. But I guess she was greedy, maybe, and she was therefore punished for it. She explains why she would be sitting in hell with Virgil.
yeah.
If that's the perspective, I haven't got confused about the perspective that the poem's coming from there.
I did share a link to a video yesterday and Friday from Ancient Greece Revisited. They had a chat with an Italian guy, I think, on Dante. Hopefully that would become a series as well, because it was a very interesting talk. And their guest pointed out that all of the persons we see in the poem, Dante views as redeemable. So he doesn't speak to or have any contact with anyone who is utterly lost, but they all will have a chance to, a real chance to redeem themselves, which I think is good.
Yeah, I can see Virgil, Rachel, that how they all seem very redeemable. And I'm sure we shall meet further people which Dante talks to,
Definitely.
whom we sort of
Yeah,
sympathize with.
this poem is inspiration for so many other literature in Europe, from all over the centuries since it was written. So yeah, definitely many interesting and inspirational parts of it, of this, I think.
Mm, absolutely. So that's sort of a bit of the background to the second canto and who precisely is in that. Shall we have the
Yes,
third canto?
now that Dante has found his courage to resume his journey, let's see what happens next.
Yes. Inferno, Canto 3. Through me the way is to the city dolent. Through me the way is to eternal dole. Through me the way among the people lost. Justice incited my sublime Creator, created me divine omnipotence, the highest wisdom and the primal love. Before me there were no created things, only etern, and I eternal last. All hope abandon, ye who enter in. These words in sombre colour I beheld, written upon the summit of a gate, whence their sense is, master, hard to me, and he to me, as one experienced. Here all suspicion needs must be abandoned. All cowardice must needs be here extinct. We to the place have come, where I have told thee, thou shalt behold the people dolorous, who have forgone the good of intellect. And after he had laid his hand on mine with joyful mien, whence I was comforted, he led me in among the secret things. There sighs, complaints, and ululations loud resounded through the air without a star, whence I, at the beginning, wept thereat. Languages diverse, horrible dialects, accents of anger, words of agony, and voices high and hoarse, with sound of hands, made up a tumult that goes whirling on, forever in that air forever black, even as the sand doth when the whirlwind breathes. And I, who had my head with horror bound, said, Master, what is this which I now hear? What folk is this, which seems by pain so vanquished? And he to me, this miserable mode, maintain the melancholy souls of those who lived without an infamy or praise. Commingled are they with that caitiff choir of angels who have not rebellious been, nor faithful were to God, but were for self. The heavens expelled them, not to be less fair, nor them the nevermore abyss receives. For glory none the damned would have from them. And I, O Master, what so grievous is to these, that maketh them lament so sore? He answered, I will tell thee very briefly. These have no longer any hope of death, and this blind life of theirs is so debased, they envious are of every other fate. No fame of them the world permits to be, misericord and justice both disdain them. Let us not speak of them, but look and pass. And I, who looked on again, beheld a banner, which, whirling round, ran on so rapidly, that of all pores it seemed to me indignant, and after it there came so long a train of people that I ne'er would have believed that ever death so many had undone. When some among them I had recognized, I looked, and I beheld the shade of him who made through cowardice the great refusal. Forthwith I comprehended and was certain that this sect was of the caitiff wretches, hateful to God and to his enemies. These miscreants, who were never alive, were naked, and were stung exceedingly by gadflies and by hornets that were there. These did their faces irrigate with blood, which with their tears commingled at their feet by disgusting worms was gathered up. And when to gazing farther I betook me, people I saw on a great river's bank, whence said I, Master, now vouchsafe to me, that I may know who these are, and what law makes them appear so ready to pass over, as I discern athwart the dusky light. And he to me, These things shall all be known to thee as soon as we our footsteps stay upon the dismal shore of Acheron. Then, with mine eyes ashamed and downward cast, fearing my words might be irksome to him, from speech refrained I, till we reached the river. And lo, towards us coming in a boat, an old man, hoary, with the hair of eld, crying, Woe unto you, ye souls depraved! Hope never more to look up into the heavens. I come to lead you to the other shore, to the eternal Hades, in heat and frost. And thou that yonder standest, living soul, withdraw thee from these people who are dead. But when he saw that I did not withdraw, he said, By other ways, by other ports, thou to the shore shalt come, not here. For passage, a lighter vessel needs must carry thee. And unto him the guide, Vex thee not, Charon. It is so willed there, where is power to do that which is willed, and farther question not. Thereat were quieted the fleecy cheeks of him the ferryman of the livid fen, who round about his eyes had wheels of flame. But all those souls who weary were, and naked, their colour changed, and gnashed their teeth together, as soon as they had heard these cruel words. God they blasphemed, and their progenitors, the human race, the place, the time, the seed of their engendering and of their birth. Thereafter altogether they drew back, bitterly weeping to the accursed shore, which waiteth every man who fears not God. Charon the demon, with the eyes of gleed, beckoning to them, collects them all together, beats with his oar whoever lags behind. As in the autumn time the leaves fall off, first one and then another, till the branch unto the earth surrenders all its spoils, in a similar wise the evil seed of Adam throw themselves from that margin, one by one, at signals as a bird unto its lure. So they depart across the dusky wave, and ere upon the other side they land, again on this side a new troop assembles. My son, the courteous master said to me, all those who perish in the wrath of God here meet together out of every land, and ready are they to pass over the river, because celestial justice spurs them on, so that their fear is turned into desire. This way there never passes a good soul, and hence if Charon doth complain of thee, well mayest thou know now what his speech imports. This being finished, all the dusk champagne trembled so violently that of that terror the recollection bathes me still with sweat. The land of tears gave forth a blast of wind, and fulminated a vermilion light, which overmastered me in every sense, and as a man whom sleep hath seized, I fell.
And there I find my mute button again. um,
So tricky
yeah,
to
in
find,
particular
isn't
when
it?
you have
Yes.
a cat that is very demanding in your lap.
Dear.
Summer is over and Luna is not happy about it.
Yes.
So
No. Does not want to go outside and get her
no,
paws wet. Absolutely not.
that is simply rude.
But yes, it is rude. Very rude. But that's cats for you. So, maybe a little vocabulary note about Canto 3. For anyone who's wondering, dolent means sad or sorrowful. Abandon hope, all hope, ye who enter here. Most ominous line ever. Now, a misericord, a bit of a confusing word for him to use, to be honest. Because the definitions I found for it were a ledge projecting from the underside of a hinged seat in a choir stall when the seat is turned up, which is very specific, and an apartment in a monastery in which some relaxations of the monastic rule were permitted. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Nope, I'm not. Okay. So, yeah, maybe he is referring to hell as some sort of monastic penance, but he doesn't seem to believe that one can ever be done with it, or does he? Does he have an idea of redemption from this space? I guess we will find out as we read. So Inferno 3 does open with the words written on the gate of hell, and the canto still depicts this as a really a threshold. You've gone past the gates, but it's a liminal space. It's between the entrance to hell and the first circle of hell, which is going to crop up in Inferno, Canto 4. So what do they see? Well, they see, appropriately, everyone who's been indifferent in life, changing their views and what have you with the wind, standing for no cause, being non-committal with their faith, running around chasing a banner with nothing on it, getting stung by some bugs for good measure, and the good and the bad alike are said to despise them, which is quite a typical European attitude, I would say. Commitment to one's words, to one's causes, sticking it out is always valued. Like, for example, if you read the Iliad, which Dante has already mentioned, the Achaeans do know that they're about to get completely and utterly smashed to pieces by the Trojans because Zeus is on Troy's side, but they realize eventually, so they're preparing to go home, until one of them, I can't remember which one, gives a stirring speech and basically says, no, we're against the gods, we're doing it properly. Don't be wusses. Well, puts it a lot more eloquently than that. But so that is quite a European attitude of Dante to be sort of, well, if you're going to rebel, do it properly. But it isn't just God they're said to have insulted here. Dante says, and their progenitors, the human race, the place, the time, the seed of their engendering and of their birth. So it sounds like these are people who haven't honored their parents, ancestors, time and place they're in. So we do indeed, I think we know a lot of people who have disavowed the seed of their engendering for convenience sake. And these folks will pay for their washed out views by chasing around the latest sort of viewpoint forever. And that's sort of Dante's idea of justice, that they're chasing around this blank banner exactly like they have done in life. And now that again may link to the very conflicted times that Dante is living in and the wars between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, that basically many parts of the Holy Roman Empire were splitting regions and cities and families, and some people were choosing their sides not based on what they actually believed. They were calculating based on political or trade expediency. Sorry. So yes, Charon is obviously a bit cross that Dante is even there because he's not dead. Charon is, in Greek myth, the ferryman who rode the dead across the river Acheron and Styx to the underworld, demanding a coin for his services, and for that reason, Greeks would place a coin in the corpse's mouth before burial. He's the offspring of Erebos, underworld darkness, and Nyx, night, and he is described as a ragged figure, filthy, repulsive, with white hair, copious, unkempt, coloring his chin. His eyes are stark and points of flame, and dirty garments knotted all hanging from his shoulders, and he punts his boat with a pole or trims the sails, and so he ferries every soul on his coracle. And he's old, but he's sort of an underworld god in a way. He can be seen in Christian art as well, and such as he does appear in Michelangelo's Last Judgment. So he's someone who's featured a bit as a demon in hell. But yes, Charon is cross that Dante's there. He says, he's like, you're not dead. Virgil says it's fine because heaven wills that Dante is going through hell right now, and reassures Dante that if Charon says he shouldn't be here, that's probably a good thing. And Dante's just overcome by the fate of these people because, as far as he realizes, they were never even alive. Because, what is your life if you stand for nothing? And thus, perhaps, he hasn't seen the other fates, but Virgil almost deems them to have a worse fate than the others, because at least the others sort of maybe know where they fit, at the very least. And at the end, he's so scared by the terrible quaking of hell, he loses consciousness. There's also someone he makes a particular reference to in this canto, which I would like to discuss a bit further. But you got any thoughts to contribute, links?
A bit of the imagery of the boatman. As you said, he is associated with bringing the living to the dead. So it does give an image of being in a liminal place between two worlds. You could also say that he represents going from one world to the other, into a different space. So it's quite a fitting imagery, I would say, even if it's not really Christian per se. It's more of a figuratively speaking image of entering a different realm.
Yeah, now if we're sort of taking maybe the psychological analysis of it, Dante might be perceived also as entering the deep subconscious realm of fears and bad desires, which is often sort of correlated with the underworld as well in tales, or the forest, or the deep sea, or somewhere similarly sort of mysterious.
Yeah, the word Dante uses for woods or forest. In Greek, the similar word means both forest and materiality, which is very interesting. The physical form. Um, and also with people not holding to
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
any conviction at all, basically just going from ideology to ideology and opinion to opinion. That definitely takes my mind to our days. And progressivism, where you always have to move somewhere and you don't really stand for anything at the end
Yes.
of the day.
Yes. Yep. You've got to keep up with the latest thing that's in vogue. Um, the the whole thing is based upon constantly pushing the boundaries of, well, we've accepted this, shall we accept that, and shall we accept that? It is chasing the newest way, really, to
Yeah,
be virtuous,
yeah,
in inverted commas. But I'd just like to clarify maybe one point in that canto, and that is someone whom Dante recognizes when he immediately recognizes what circle he's in, and that person actually seems to be a saint, Saint Celestine V, original name Pietro Damorone, uh, born in Kingdom of Two Sicilies, died May 19th, 1296. And he was a Benedictine in his youth, but he became a hermit and lived in the Abruzzi Mountains. Abruzzi, probably more accurate pronunciation, near Sulmona. And he was a very rigorous ascetic, attracted a lot of followers, became head of a group of hermits that were later called the Celestines and incorporated into the sort of the Benedictines. Very sort of strict. He was in his 80s when he got elected pope in 1294. He accepted because of the sort of perilous situation of the church. The papacy had been vacant for about 2 years. Although a holy man, he really lacked administrative ability, and as such a person probably would, considered the affairs of papacy really a distraction from his ascetic practices and struggle for salvation. He distrusted all the cardinals and became dependent on Charles II of Naples, with whose supporters he filled the curia. And then he favoured his own hermits, the Franciscan spirituals, where he permitted to secede from the main part of the order. Um, a solution that was really made permanent later. And then he sort of eventually decides it's dangerous for the church and his soul if he continues as pope. So he consults the cardinals and resigns on December 13th. Um, After sort of Cardinal Benedict Catani, um, not probably haven't pronounced that right at all, became his successor. Boniface VIII claimed the resignation was unlawful, and thus the majority of cardinals found it advisable to keep Celestine sort of under superstition. He wasn't allowed to return to his hermitage, and on the verge of escaping via the Adriatic Sea, he was captured and sent back to Boniface, who kept him in Fermone Castle, where he died. Although he's regarded as having the courage to terminate an impossible situation, but Dante is said to have placed him at the entrance to hell for his abdication and alludes um, to the Pope as him who made through cowardice the great refusal. And so that's quite interesting. He thinks that he should have stuck more to that position and done his duty and then stayed in that position. So he doesn't regard him as as virtuous for it. He thinks if he believed the church needed sorted out, then he should have just done it. So that's an interesting. I don't know much about this Celestine guy.
Neither do I.
but I can see why Dante doesn't actually like um this this guy. You know, he lays down the papacy on the grounds of his age. It's a bit wishy-washy. Um, so I think we do sort of further looking into why Dante would particularly dislike this guy quite so much. And if anybody on the chat sort of has an opinion on it, we would be interested to know. Yeah, but that's really all I have to say about Canto 3, because I think it's very clear that one. Don't be a wet flannel. You'll end up in eternal limbo.
Yeah, when you do find the courage to go, there's a reason you have to have the courage. The journey won't be easy, even if you might have passed the greatest test by finding your courage. There's still a whole journey to go.
Indeed. And we shall continue with the journey with Canto 4 on our next Dante stream.
Yeah, one of the
What
things
is it?
I find
Whoops, sorry.
interesting with this is even though it's a very Christian story, of course, you can read it without being a Christian, because it touches upon so many things that is deeply rooted in our cultures, and things that really are quite universal. So, just to compare it a bit to The Parson's Tale, that is a bit more. It's not a tale; it's more a treatise. It was basically copied from some
Yeah.
French guy, and that is definitely more condemning. So you can read that and be left with the feeling that, okay, I'm a sinner. That that's fair enough. But I can never redeem myself because the ideals are impossible to live up to. So in contrast to that, Dante spends as much time in hell as he does in heaven during the Divine Comedy. So yeah. Oh, another point I just remembered. The guy who wrote the Decameron was actually the guy who came up with the term the Divine Comedy, I think. I do think he had some influence on that. He called his own work the Decameron.
Yeah.
He called that the human comedy or something like that. Basically, putting it
Okay.
a bit more down to earth and maybe also down valuing his own work a bit. So yeah, just a little fun fact.
Yeah. Well, the Divine Comedy.
Yeah.
We shall see if it's funny. It possibly is in
Yeah,
parts.
well, then you might have to
But
go into the
yes.
concept of what comedy was thought of back in the day. It's
What?
yeah,
What is comedy? What is funny? It's
yeah. Well, it's
objective.
not just about being funny and sort of the slick slapstick humor we know of today. So yes, bad Hollywood,
Yes.
shame on you. It's more than that.
Mm.
So yeah, now we have taken you through the
Yeah.
first three cantos. So that is it for tonight.
Got you through
Mm-hmm.
the introduction and the vestibule of hell. And next, Dante's Inferno stream, we will be venturing into hell proper, first circle. What are we doing next
We
week? Let's have a look.
we are having
Yes, it's Laura Lee.
Orly is coming back.
Laura Lee Sky, and it's femininity. The one we've been waiting to have the discussion about because, of course, we have opinions.
Absolutely. And it will definitely be an interesting conversation. So I hope you will join us for that talk. Of
Oh, I agree. Donated 1 diamond. Thank you, ladies. Next week go to hell. Sure, I'll do some field research. Oh
yeah.
dear.
So after next week we will have 1 week off before we pick it up again. So yeah, I think we are up to date on everything.
Yes, we are. So join us next week for Lord of the Rings with Laura Lee. Also, at the end of October, it will be our Halloween special with Bard and White Art Collective. So that would be really cool if we could see it all there. We've still got our Halloween competition running for that. So if anybody wants to join in, get in the Bard lobby. I'll just post it in the DLive chat. So yeah, would be really interesting to see all of your Halloween spooky pictures, spooky music, spooky poems, stories. We can work with it. Show us what you got.
Absolutely. And of course, depending on how much we get in, if we can't fit it into the show, we will definitely showcase it on our channels and everything. So, you know, any poems or stories we can't fit in, we will put them up as separate videos. We definitely want to support the creators in our realm.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
We're not far off from another spooky season.
Yes, indeed. I think it will be quite spooky. I believe even after the Halloween, we're right back into hell.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, Halloween is
Spooky.
the time of year where the veil between the worlds are at the thinnest, so quite fitting.
Yes.
Nullus has returned
Well,
just as we are finishing off. We will finish off with his poem on the circles of hell, which he has gracefully
yes.
let us use. So thank you very much for that. It is a
Indeed.
brilliant poem. Absolutely love it. The link for it is in the YouTube description. For anyone who wants to take a look, I will only play the audio, but definitely go check out his video with it as well. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
It's a good
I
one.
think that is it for this time. So have a wonderful Sunday evening and a great week ahead of you, and see you all next Sunday.
See you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Good night.
Circles of hell. Overexposed negatives with nothing left to mystery, carving a relief from a multicolored cameo shell. All these vacuous souls living their lives vicariously as Dante invites us to witness the 9 circles of hell. Diminishing echoes in grand cathedrals, tiny churches. The eons pass, yet his words retain their sacred pertinence. Men wandering in limbo, resulting in fruitless searches. These mortal sins escalate from ignorance to arrogance. Sweaty wrists slowly glide along a neoprene canopy, bloodshot eyes gawking at a screen of stretched out screaming harlots. Stark alienation exemplifies the solitary. Cleopatra and Dido become pornographic starlets. Endless aisles of sustenance overwhelming dulled senses, artificial scrapings rotting in a refrigerator, a postmodern cornucopia without consequences, the gluttony of the lowest common denominator. Among all sins to perceive as common human deficiency, simple hoggish traits that have often corrupted the virtuous. Stubby, sticky fingers taking everything without mercy. Self-serving petty desires that serve no higher purpose. Injustice, inequity, and a million grievances. Demoralizing passions transforming the benevolent. Empathy carries over, falling into many pieces, lost in blind fury, and their purpose becomes irrelevant. Equivocal declarations bewildering the faithful, common circus performers dancing on a holy altar, acquiesce to a narration inviting the disgraceful, by placating the devil, even the anointed falter. Strike to shadow, bone and glass, faithful collars of self-pity, defiling the basilica of God's sacred creation, financiers who willfully bankrupt every town and city, tragically lost figures of a misguided false persuasion. Simulating grace, representing numinous causes, sorcerers of legislation, barators paid to deceive, false prophets spinning hatred with extravagant promises, liars, seducers, plagiarists deserve flames upon their feet. Those wretched who abandon brothers and nationality, destroying the innocent for moments of celebrity. All conniving, scheming murderers deserve no sympathy. Retribution comes in the form of bitter reality. Molten core flows from the darkest depths of this horrific space. In this province, there's not a single hymn nor homily. A three-headed beast devours those who have defiled grace. Distorted clowns howl in the heart of this divine comedy.